Okay, so I think we are live on YouTube now. Great. Hello, everyone. Sorry, forgot to welcome all of you here.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Adrija, and we're organizing this event as a part of SOAS India Society. And Sagar, who's sitting right there, and I will be chairing and taking you through the event. And our main speakers are on the screen right now, and you'll hear from them, but we wanted to start by setting the context of why we are here and why we are doing this event. So 5th July marked the first death anniversary of Father Stan Swami, who died while in custody as he was arrested for the Bhima Koregaon case under the draconian Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or UAPA as we know it. Father Stan Swami was a dedicated human rights activist who had spent decades working amongst Adivasis of Jharkhand in solidarity of their struggles for their land and rights. He actively opposed the various mining and dam projects of industrialists in the region, which would result in large-scale displacement of Adivasis with limited compensation given to them. He fiercely opposed the collusion of the industrialists and the state officials and large-scale incarceration of Adivasi youth who took part in these struggles. He also called on various governments to implement in these regions the various schemes and laws meant for tribal welfare and development. In 2006, he set up the Social Action Center called Bagicha near Ranchi as a meeting point and platform for all organizations working in the region for human rights and espousing the cause of the oppressed to discuss and execute plans and to develop leadership skills within such organizations. It was Bagicha where Father Stan was arrested from, and it was Bagicha where Father Stan requested the Bombay High Court to be shifted during his bail application, as he wished to die amongst his people. That request of his was denied, and he ultimately passed away in Mumbai, far from the region and far from the people that he loved. In June, he was honored by the jury of the Martin Ennals Award, which is considered to be the Nobel Prize for human rights defenders. Even two representatives of the US Congress recently introduced a resolution seeking an independent investigation into his death. We will hear some letters by his fellow political prisoners and those still incarcerated and in prison in a bit. But for now, I think if you want to understand Father Stan and his legacy and what happened, we should start by hearing his voice. So we wanted to start with a video of Father Stan and then moving on to the rest of the program.
And this video we feel is important because this was the last video that Father Stan put out before he was arrested, before he knew that the NIA was going to take him into custody. It's a very, very powerful video because he very clearly states in this video as to how he was complying with the police, with the NIA. There was no need for him to be taken from Bagecha, from Jharkhand to Bombay. He very clearly states that. He also talks about the work that he was doing and why he thinks the NIA was persecuting him. And again, this is his last message, basically, in a way. So we feel it's very important that that voice is visible.
No. I say etc. For which what and some persons whom I had come across in this process, they started to put before me
Hello, everyone. Sorry, this is a bit weird because I'm running between two mics because we're playing from one mic and we're speaking from one mic because of the interference. But hopefully it should get sorted out soon. And when we play the next video, hopefully our speakers will be able to hear as well. And we really apologize that you couldn't hear the video, but we've put the link on the chat for all of you. Now that we've heard from Father Stan, I would like to go on to our panelists for the day. And we are so grateful to have a group of speakers who are very closely associated with Father Stan and who are here to tell us not only about what happened, but also about his work, his legacy, but also the person that he was. So I'll go to our first speaker, Mihir Desai. Mihir is a human rights lawyer practicing as a senior counsel in High Court of Bombay and Supreme Court of India. He is the co-founder of Indian People's Tribunal and Human Rights Law Network and a member of the People's Union for Civil Liberties, or PUCL. He has handled cases on fake encounters, riots, custodial deaths, and cases under anti-terror laws such as UAPA. He has represented a number of accused in the Bhima Koregaon cases, and he was representing Father Stan in the Bombay High Court for his medical bail application as well. He has also filed a petition on behalf of the Jesuits to clear Father Stan's name of the accusations, as well as to urge the High Court to monitor a judicial inquiry into the cause of his custodial death. So Mihir, over to you. And you will be like, we were thinking of that you speak to us for about 10 to 12 minutes, but if you go some more time, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. Let me know if I'm audible.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Mihir.
fine. Thanks. Yeah, well, yesterday was, 2 days back was Father Stan's first death anniversary. A very tragic event which happened on 5th of July last year. I personally knew Father Stan since last more than 30 years. And very rarely I have come across a more soft-spoken, more humble person than Father Stan. I used to know him. I used to go to Chaibasa. I used to go to Ranchi at times for helping him out with some legal cases, etc., for legal trainings for the tribal lawyers. It was about in 2018 when I got a call from him saying that, look, this police are here from Maharashtra and they are trying to investigate, they are investigating some case. That case is called Bhima Koregaon. And they are asking me questions. Now, will you please explain to me what is Bhima Koregaon? Because he had no clue what was Bhima Koregaon. And most of the people in the country know what was Bhima Koregaon, which was the place where the incident happened, which ultimately led to this charge sheet and these charge sheets involving a large number of persons, including Stan Swamy. So in 2018, we filed a case in the High Court saying that, we don't know what they are investigating. I have no connection with this event which happened 3,000 miles away. I was not there. I don't even know what that place is all about. So I don't know why they are investigating me for this. Okay. And in the High Court, the prosecution said, oh, don't worry, we are not considering him as an accused. Okay. So the matter rested there. Then again in the next year, they came in 2019 and raided his place. Again, took out all the documents, computers, etc. And you must remember that the place where he stays in, or used to stay in, is a very humble abode. It's an NGO called Bagaicha, where he stays, where he used to stay. He had a small room to himself, a small room which was an office. I also went and stayed there a couple of times, and these are very, very humble, down-to-earth kind of rooms. You won't find AC there. You won't find, the fan will barely work kind of thing. And he worked in that kind of an environment, small rooms. And he was completely aghast as to why these people are after me. Anyway, in 2019 also nothing happened. 2020 they came again after 1 year and raided his house and office, house cum office, and again asked him some hundreds of questions, and then told him that you have to come to Bombay. That is 3,000 miles from where he was having his Bagaicha. When I talked to him on phone at that time, I told him that I suspect they want to arrest you. Okay? it was in that context that I think it was in that context that he made the statement which you all heard or read just 5 minutes back. That he realized that he was going to be taken to jail, and he made a statement. Now, remember one thing: that the case in which he's involved, okay, arose out of, as I said, 3,000 miles away. There was a meeting, a public meeting, organized by a retired Supreme Court judge of India and a retired High Court judge of India, okay, where certain issues were raised concerning the Dalit community, that is a scheduled caste community who are traditionally been considered to be untouchables, etc. On the next day, there was some violence at a completely different place. Okay. And the police used this as an opportunity, and the violence was generated by the Hindu right wing, Eknath Bhide and others. Okay. And the police used this opportunity, okay, to scuttle down, to swoop down and arrest certain people. Now, there are remember another thing, that in India right now, what we are looking at is a situation where the right wing is very, very strong politically, culturally, and they do not like any kind of dissent. So civil society dissent is something which they wanted to crush very badly. So they used this case to round up people from across the country, journalists, academicians, poets, intellectuals, civil society activists, lawyers. 16 people were arrested. The 16th was, one of the 16 was Father Sten Swami, who was arrested. The charge against him was that he was part of a Maoist organization. Okay? Now, this man is so gentle that I can assure you he can't even hurt a fly. Okay? A Maoist organization is a gun-wielding organization which the police keep on talking about. They took his computers, okay, and said that we have found something on your computers. Okay? Now, in the meanwhile, we had realized that by getting analysis done of various other computers in the same case, we had found out that the police or somebody else on behalf of the establishment had planted actually letters and evidence on people's computers over a period of 2 years. We have got those reports. We have got the reports validated by various people, international agencies, etc. And we realized that even Father Sten, the documents which they were talking about were all planted. Okay? Now, also remember that Father Sten was the most prominent activist in Jharkhand, okay, on the issues of civil rights. So if you want to attack an activist who is the most prominent activist on this issue, you would attack generally Father Sten. I mean, Father Sten would be your ideal target if you want to catch somebody and crush the civil rights movement. That is what. Father Sten was arrested. Now, remember, the man was 83, 84 years old. Frail person. Okay? He was taken to jail. Initially, there was a huge thing. He suffered from Parkinson's disease. So he can't even hold a cup of tea. Okay, even a glass of water he cannot hold, and he needed a sipper. Okay, in order to sip his water, he couldn't put a glass to his mouth and drink it. His sipper was taken away, was denied. Then there was an international outrage about why he's being denied a sipper, and finally they give him the sipper. Okay? This was the situation of Father Sten. Time to time, he was taken to some, when he complained, he was taken to government hospital. Government hospital did a very kind of a casual job of what he was suffering from, sent him back to jail. This is the situation. Now, a bail application was filed in the lowest court where the matter was heard, that is the Sessions Court, which is lower than the High Court. Where the hierarchy is, you have the Supreme Court, which is highest, then you have the High Court, and then you have the Sessions Court. So High Court, a bail application, as a Sessions Court, a bail application was filed for him, saying that release him either on bail, on merits, or on medical bail, because the man cannot sustain. He's an 84-year-old harmless man. Why have you put him in jail? He cannot sustain this whole thing. Okay? That bail was rejected by the Sessions Court. okay, on some absolutely flimsy and frivolous grounds. Matter was carried to High Court. High Court, the matter went on from time to time. Finally, we had to tell the High Court judge. Some of the High Court judges were kind enough to call him to to talk to him from jail and ask him how his health was, etc., and asked him whether he wants to go to hospital. He said that he doesn't want to go to government hospital. He had seen what the nature of facilities available there were. He said, I'll fall even more sick if I go to that government hospital. And he was very firm. He said, look, I have not, even to the High Court judge, he mentioned, look, I have not done anything wrong. Okay? I am firm in my beliefs, I am firm in my commitments, and I have not done anything wrong. And I'll keep on fighting for the marginalized people, which has been my role throughout my life. Okay? That's what he said. Okay? Finally, we convinced him that his health was not good and his health was deteriorating. We said, you must be admitted to a private hospital. So it was agreed that he would get admitted to a private hospital. When the private hospital ambulance came to take him, in the ambulance itself, they detected that the man was suffering from COVID. Now, this man had been suffering from COVID for some time, and the government hospital or the jail hospital did not detect it, did not carry out any tests. That was the situation. Finally, he was taken to private hospital, but possibly by that time it was too late. Okay? The private hospital was very good, gave excellent treatment, but at the end of the day, the man unfortunately passed away. It was a clear case of, if not connivance, at least negligence by the authorities. It was a clear case. Therefore, when I mentioned this to the court, that unfortunately the doctor from the hospital came and told the judge that unfortunately he's passed away today. I mean, that's the situation. So so after that, we decided in concurrence with the Jesuit community that we should file a case for having a judicial inquiry, and second, having his name cleared. Because of course a trial cannot go on. A person is dead, so the trial is over as far as he is concerned. Okay? But we want to get his name cleared. We at least want a presumption of innocence declaration from the High Court, and we want a judicial inquiry. We have made it very clear we don't want money. We could ask for compensation, but we are not interested. Nobody is interested in getting money for his death. So we are not asking for compensation. We are saying that clear his name and hold a judicial inquiry into what caused his death. So at least in future, this does not happen. That case is going on in the High Court. It should come up in another week or 10 days time. It's very sad that that neither the authorities which arrested him, they should never have arrested him. Second thing is, even the judiciary, in my submission, especially the lower judiciary, failed by rejecting his bail. Okay? The prison authorities. So there's a problem with the prison authorities, problem with the judiciary, and problem with the investigating agency. At all three levels, there has been a failure, which ultimately led to his death. And all of us were very heartbroken when this happened. But we decided that we will continue to fight. Okay, and that's what we are doing. That's what we'll continue to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mihir. Will you mute? Sorry.
I heard your thank you 10 times. Thank you very much for that.
We are that thankful, Mihir. We are that you've taken. We know how busy you are, and that you've taken time out to speak with us today. So we are very grateful, and we wish that we could see our audience here. And if you were in person, we would have applauded. But unfortunately, this is the hybrid situation that we are in. But
nothing to applaud. So that's all right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mihir. I'm going to pass on to Father Joe after this. Father Joe Xavier is the director of the Indian Social Institute in Bangalore, which is a training and resource institute that works with activists, trainers, and leaders of marginalized communities to help them claim their entitlements, rights, and improve quality of life. Father Stan himself served as the second director of this institute from 1975 to 1986. He was a close companion of Father Stan, having worked extensively with him in Ranchi, and he was in regular contact with him before his incarceration. So over to you, Father Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajita. And I'm so happy to see Mihir, Jean, and others, Sagar particularly. Sagar, whom I have met in Bombay a couple of times in his house. I knew what it is. Anyway, Mihir put it very well, the legal dimension of it. So I'm going to take a different dimension of Stan's life, how I have seen him personally. Between me and Stan, it's about 24 years difference. So it's a huge gap. It's a generation, more than a generation. But still, I had an opportunity to work with him from 2001. In fact, I was really with him when he conceived this idea of Bagaicha and telling the provincials, moving this idea and getting things done. And ultimately in 2006, when this center was inaugurated, Stan himself invited to be one of the chief guests for that function, because that's the role I had played those years, and we were together. And our relationship continued. Then particularly in 2019, because I was different places, including in Rome, my assignment was there. But in 2019, when another particular case called Pattalgadi case, where in the stones of the villages of Adivasis, the constitutional provisions, particularly the fifth schedule, PESA Act, were returned. It was yet another case where Stan was, sort of implicated, and that case was going on at that point of time. The Ranchi friends felt it's better he goes to Bangalore for various other things, including medical treatment. So Stan came as I took over this place in 2019, Bangalore, from where I'm talking. He came and stayed with me for about 6 months. So that is the time his friends asked him, why don't you put together your thoughts? And he started writing this book, which he asked me to publish. I am not the silent spectator. Of course, he gave the name originally, Why Truth Has Become So Bitter, Dissent So Intolerable, Justice So Out of Reach. Then, because his last words were, I'm not a silent spectator, so we have highlighted that and published it. This, he wrote it when he was in Bangalore in 2019. He asked me to publish it, but as I was about to publish, the NIA inquiry started. Then I had to tell him, let's wait, then we'll publish it later. He didn't leave me in peace. He's taken to prison. From there, he asked me, when are you going to publish it? I said, Stan, wait. Let's get you out. Mihir is working on it. Others are working on it. Let's get you out on bail. Then we'll publish it. Let's not create more confusion. Okay, I thought he would leave it. He goes to hospital, Holy Spirit Hospital. From there, he is asking me, when are you going to publish it? Stan, you know I will publish it. Yes, I know you will publish it. That's how we started. But at the end, as you can see, what he has written, plus what he wrote from prison, everything I could put them together in the form of my letters and prison, all these things. All these things are his letters from prison. This is the cover. Once I see, I know it is from Stan. It will come from the prison, one after the other. Now, on this day, what do I want to remember? On 28th of June last year, that was my last conversation with him, because after that his health totally deteriorated. Somehow I felt, and he also felt, probably that was our last conversation. And he said very clearly, Joe, I want to tell you something, because sometimes he speaks like this, which means from the depth of his heart, he wants to communicate something. And he said, now I am like a child. He was lying on the bed. Of course, he couldn't sit. I'm like a child. For every little thing, I need assistance to take food or to get up, to go to toilet. I need help. I need assistance. But I want to tell you something. Take forward the struggles of the Adivasis for a dignified life. This was his phrase. Take forward the struggles of the Adivasis for a dignified life. And he also said, I belong to the Universal Society. Whatever the Jesuit provincials, because I'm also a Jesuit, he's also a Jesuit, we come under a religious order. Whatever the provincials, the heads, the leaders decide, it is fine with me. Almost in a note of surrendering and in the note of deep faith in humanity, he uttered this. I was broken at that time itself, because when he said, take forward, almost it is his last words, like, to me. This is what it is. And Mihir knows, on the last day, I thought I would meet him. I went to Bombay, but I could not meet him. As I reached the Mumbai airport on 5th, I had this news. The first person whom I communicated was Mihir. Then we planned how to proceed and all that. It went. For me, yes, a deep faith as a Jesuit, you call it spirituality, but also deep faith in humanity. He really believed there will be a day that Adivasis will find a dignified life. And he used to say, all that I'm doing is, during my lifetime, I'm trying to do something of what I can. But this legacy should continue. This will happen. This was his deep faith. That is the person of Stan. A man deeply rooted in a spirituality that doesn't end with the materialism of one's own lifetime, but leave something for the future, and strongly believing that will happen, we must continue. I think that gives me an immense joy, immense power, immense energy to continue this work. He has said this on many occasions, on various things. He used to write letters from the letters and the poems from the prison. Often he would use the word truth. This is one of his poems that was written, which I have published in that book. He will end like this: may truth embolden us to speak truth to power and be ready to pay the price. May truth embolden us. Highly, a tone that gives you energy to speak truth to power and be ready to pay the price. And these three lines summarize his life. And when he was arrested, when the entire his friends, all the Jesuits, everybody asking, please find out how is his health. And I tried to ask him, how is your health? I'm okay. My health is okay. But look at many other people. They're still struggling. I'm okay, comfortable. He would never make a complaint about his own situation. Rather, he was always concerned about the health of the others, the health of the other prisoners. And from the prison, he has been going around talking to people, putting his hand like this in a respectful manner, whichever religion, whichever caste, whichever age group and all that. So he had a high credibility within the prison itself. That's why everybody loved him in the prison. And so much so, he was so concerned with the ordinary people. Once he made a phone call, can you send me a 32-inch pant and a full hand shirt? I knew it was not for him. So I said, Stan, what is this? Why do you want this? Joe, there is somebody very poor. There's nobody coming and see him. He doesn't have proper clothes. I want to give him. Then he asked him, do you need anything? Do you remember in 2019 when I came to Bangalore, I left one charo, one lungi that we wear at night. I'm sure it must be with you. Please send that to me. This is what the person is. I sent it to him. Man who always lived for others, who felt this his call is to really reach out to the most poor and the vulnerable. And all along, that is what he breathed, that's what he ate, that's what he drank. Wherever he talks about the Adivasis, he will start with, my brothers and sisters, Adivasi brothers and sisters. This is how he will start. And that was his lifeline. That is why, even at the end from prison, he said, why do I need bail? If you are letting me out on a bail, send me to Ranchi. For me, to have a bail means I want to be with my kith and kin. That is my Adivasi friends, brothers and sisters. No more family friends, with them. And I want to convey to them what I feel innermost. That is my freedom. If you're just letting me out of the prison, putting me in Bombay, whom I don't know, that freedom doesn't mean much to me. So he had a very, very high level of an understanding of life, understanding of spirituality, and understanding the compassionate love for the other, which he all foregrounded, not in the typical traditional church, hierarchical church, but in the historical person of Jesus. That is what his roots were. That is why he asked me to send a book called Jesus and Historical Approximation. In the prison cell, Stan, Arun Ferreira, and Anand Teltube, all the three of them used to discuss hours together on this book, how Jesus made a big history as a revolutionary during his time, giving life to the last and the least, reaching out to the last and the least. The church has forgotten. The hierarchy has forgotten. We need to resurrect that spirituality to give life, quality of life to the poor. This was his call. This was his beckoning. And I tell you, the way the civil society groups, the entire community rose up to this occasion. And at the end, I said, God glorified him in his death, because so many people became aware of this person. Through him, what is happening to the human rights defenders, and many, many people stood by us. It is their power, their encouragement really helped us to really reflect on what we are called to do, and inviting us to pass on a legacy towards the future, particularly to the younger generations, the students, the youth, that you have a great future. Let's not think of only ourselves. Let's think of the future generation, particularly of those who are in the peripheries, those who are excluded. This is our call, and we as Jesuits, along with our friends, have decided to continue to carry forward this legacy in the best manner possible. Join us in this march. We are with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Father Joe, for sharing these memories and telling us who Father Stan was. There's so many lessons that we can learn from him, but in the times that we live, his message of having deep faith in humanity and human spirit, speaking truth to power, and taking forward and being there to take forward the struggles of the most marginalized in our communities, are lessons that all of us in this room and who are seeing us today can learn. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass on to Jean after this. So our final speaker is Jean Drèze. He's a development economist and an activist who have been influential in the economic policy making in India. He played a key role in drafting of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, or NREGA, as well as the Right to Food Act. He's currently an honorary professor at the Delhi School of Economics and a visiting professor at the Department of Economics in Ranchi University. He's worked with Father Stan for more than 15 years on issues of human rights and economic and social rights in Ranchi and Jharkhand as a whole. Thank you so much, Ron, for being here. I know you've had a long day today, so we are grateful that you could make it. So over to you.
Thank you, Adija. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this remembrance event. I will speak for a few minutes about Stan and for a few minutes about the larger issue of under trials and the so-called justice system, which is actually an injustice system for the vast majority of people in India. Because as Joe has already mentioned, Stan never wanted attention for himself. He wanted attention for the issues that he stood for. And for me, of course, he was a dear friend and comrade, but he's also a symbol of the grave injustice that has been done for decades to hundreds of thousands of under trials across India and continues to be done today. About Stan, Mihir and Joe have already spoken eloquently and movingly, and I can say that everything they said corresponds to my own experience of Stan. I cannot claim to have known him very well because he was already well into his 70s when I moved to Jharkhand 10 years ago. But from then on, I met him fairly regularly at a number of events, meetings, demonstrations, dharnas, workshops, and so on and so forth. And I think I would speak for many people when I say that he was a pillar of strength for the social movements in Jharkhand. He was always there when something was happening, when people were getting together for the cause of human rights. He was someone we could always count on. He was very clear about his values and commitments. He was a person of high integrity, and above all, a person who lived by his principles until the end. If you want to learn about Stan, by the way, I couldn't hear the audio in the video that was shown earlier, so I'm sure it was a very interesting video. But if you want to learn about Stan, I cannot do better than to appeal to you to watch his interview with Tapan Bose, which is available on YouTube. It's a wonderful interview. It's just 25 minutes, but it tells you a lot about Stan's character, his ideas, his values, his work, his humility, his gentleness, and I would add his anger, because for all his gentleness, Stan was also an angry man in a very healthy way. He was angry against injustice and the perpetrators of injustice. This was not an impulsive anger that clouded his judgments, but a reasoned anger that translated into action. The Tapan Bose interview is also very interesting because it tells us something about Stan's philosophy of action. I think that is of great interest in its own right. Even if you're not interested in Stan, I think you should watch this interview because it tells us something about how he thought about collective action. As has already been said, Stan was a very selfless, kind, and generous man, but he did not really think of service as a way of changing the world. I'm sure that he had nothing against service. I'm sure he must have supported it in many ways through his life, but what he really wanted was resistance and collective action for radical change. And he felt that his own role was to be in solidarity with people who stand up for their rights and resist oppression, whether it is economic exploitation or forced displacement or state harassment. I will read a few sentences from that interview for the benefit of those who don't have the time to watch it. This is what he said. What can we hope for? People are coming to a process of being disillusioned about their own so-called leadership, about the so-called political setup, so-called government, the local administration, the police, and so on. People are beginning to see them through and through for what they are. And the resistance will continue, he emphasized, will continue. And that's where the challenge for activists like us is. In what way, using whatever talent or whatever things we have, can we support such resistance movements so that the people as people, not looking up to big leaders, MP or MLA or this or that person, but counting on their own strength, stand up for their rights. And we must be ready to pay the cost. The last sentence, as many of you would know, is something he often said. It's interesting that he already said it in this interview, which goes back about 4 years. And he said it again just before he was sent to jail, knowing quite well, probably by that time, that he may not come back. And he said it again in that poem that Joe read out. And this brings me to the last point I want to make in this brief remembrance of Stan. I'm calling him Stan because I think that's how he liked to be called, at least by his friends. He had no objection to being called Father Stan, of course, but I think he liked to be called Stan. For me, he was first and foremost a man of principles who lived by his convictions until the end. It is characteristic that his special commitment to under trials eventually translated into his becoming an under trial himself and sharing their plight. This brings me to the second part about the plight of under trials and the so-called justice system, which is actually an injustice system, because as I said, Stan is also a symbol of that huge problem. Now, Stan is an extreme case of gratuitous denial of bail. Mihir has already spoken about that. There was absolutely no reason to deny him bail. He was an old man, frail, ill, at risk of dying. He was not a flight risk. There was no way he could have fled. He was cooperating with the investigating agencies. And if I can add in passing, the charges were also quite absurd. And in the charge sheet on the basis of which he was sent to jail, which I read very carefully, there is not a shred of evidence of the veracity of these absurd charges. In spite of this, he was sent to jail and eventually he died. Now, how are we to understand this? I think one way to understand it is that it was a demonstration of ruthlessness. There are many such demonstrations going on all the time, so maybe it was just demonstrating the ruthlessness of the state as a way of scaring people. But the other way to understand it is that this is just the way things go all the time. This is how under trials, not only under UAPA, but of course, especially under UAPA, are being treated routinely across the country. And I think that today, this kind of legal harassment has become the predominant means of social control and of keeping people in their place. We must remember that India is a caste-ridden society where one of the problems of the upper caste, who were always in a small minority, was how to control the large majority of the population. In the old days, they could do it through violence, they could do it by depriving people of education and so on and so forth. All this has become a little bit more difficult now, but one way that remains now very convenient and easy is to slap false cases on people. That's a very easy and effective way of preventing dissent and people standing for their rights, standing up for their rights. It's particularly effective because it's riskless. I mean, if you kill somebody, there's some minor risk that you might actually be punished. But if you slap an FIR on somebody, you know, you are not going to be to get into trouble. It is really pathetic to see the plight of under trials across the country that has gone on for a very long time, how their lives are ruined when they spend years on end in jail, often without much knowledge of what is going on, what the charges are, what is the progress of the trial, exploited to no end by greedy lawyers, and with their families often having to sell their property to pay the fees and so on, so that not only the under trial, but also the entire family's life is ruined by the end of the process. I think that side of the story is now better understood, partly because of all the attention that has been received by Stan's case, which, as I said, is an extreme case. But the other side of the same coin is that people in positions of power almost invariably get bail when efforts are made to hold them accountable through the courts, even for the worst crimes, whether it is the perpetrators of massacres of Dalits, or the instigators of communal violence, or those responsible for acts of lynching. All those people easily get bail, and since the trials tend to drag on for years and rarely end in conviction, this means that those people in positions of power have nothing to fear from the law. So the bottom line is that the bail system has become a substitute for the justice system. It performs the effective function of the justice system, which is to protect the privileged against the poor and keep the poor in their place. And that helps us to understand why nothing changes after so many years, why this system continues, because it is a rotten system, but it works quite well for the privileged. And alas, we can say the same of many other democratic institutions in India. I'll end here. I'll just end by saying that I think the situation today in India is very sinister and very worrying. India is sliding faster and faster into authoritarianism. Just before this meeting, I learned that a huge fine of 60 crores of rupees has been slapped on Akar Patel and Amnesty International India. It's not difficult to guess the reason. Not only Amnesty, but the Human Rights Law Network, which I think Mihir Desai co-founded with others, who also had to shut down. Stan Swamy died. Many other prominent human rights activists are in jail. Teesta Setalwar is in jail. Khurram Parvez, the leading human rights activist in Kashmir, is in jail and nobody is talking about it. Harsh Manda would probably be in jail if he had not left the country in good time. And this continues with the news tightening faster every day. So all we can do in this situation is to get inspiration from Stan and to continue resisting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, Did you hear 10 thank yous as well? Because that's how grateful we are.
Not 10, but 5. It's good enough. Thank you.
No, but also thank you so much for reminding us and telling us about the systemic nature of violence, but also reminding us at this very important time through the legacy of Stan, the need for resistance and fighting this authoritarianism that we see in the country today. I'm now going to pass on to Sagar, because what we thought would be wonderful after this was to hear from some of the people who remain incarcerated in prison right now, to hear what they have to tell about the time that they spent with Father Stan, but also to remember that this doesn't end here, right? As John was telling us, there are still people who are incarcerated in prison, and this is a long fight. And we not only remember Father Stan's legacy, but through that remind ourselves the constant need for struggle and resistance. Sagar, do you want to swap places with me? So we're going to read out Arun's letter and Vernon's letter.
Yeah, so we felt like reading these excerpts from these letters are important because these are people who were with Father Stan in his last days. They spent a lot of time together and they really grew. They didn't know each other before, but in this period they grew close, and Father Stan's last few days was actually spent with them, and they really saw him and learned about him. And also we felt it's important because these are people who are incarcerated at present and their voice can't really reach us. They would have definitely spoken if they had the chance, but it's a reminder that there are many people still languishing in prison. So I'll read excerpts of it. This is written by Arun Ferreira. He was personally taking care of Father Stan because the Taloja jail where Father Stan was, they didn't have medical help to take care of him. So he had to be taken care of by his co-accused. Although we received news by late evening on October 8, 2020 of Father Stan Swami's arrest, we were quite shocked to see him the next morning in the adjoining barrack conversing with inmates in his impeccable Hindi. Stan was extremely happy to meet us, and the stress of the first night in prison immediately evaporated. Over the next 2 months, the three of us developed a memorable friendship with Stan, three of us being Arun, Vernon Gonsalves, and Father Stan, who engaged us with anecdotes of his vast experience and occasionally with songs. Stan insisted with the prison authorities that he required assistance not only for his daily chores but also for meaningful communication. I was then shifted to Father Stan's cell on December 5th, along with another inmate whom we fondly called Chacha. The three of us spent hours, days, and months together, and that's when I experienced the man Stan, who had the remarkable ability of leaving a lasting impression on everyone he met. As absurd as it may seem, this dazzling ability came from his plain and pure simplicity, a simplicity that permeated each and every aspect of his life. For instance, Stan had this beautiful habit of graciously acknowledging someone by placing his hand across his chest, accompanied by a humble nod. This simple gesture of mutual respect with young inmates or prison officials had the charm to win over hearts. Never had I ever noticed Stan being dismissive or condescending towards others, even those much younger to him, always believing that love is something that simply means sharing. And sharing would not mean the act of giving, as many of us understood. For Stan, it meant much more. It meant partaking in the pain and in the sorrows of others. So Arun spent a long time with Father Stan, and he very evocatively and powerfully describes how the bail rejection that Mihir spoke of, the actual impact that it had on Father Stan. Because as Arun says, Father Stan was always very optimistic, and he had this belief that the judiciary at least would let him go and would set him free. But when he saw the bail rejection, the effect on his health and his morale was very clear, which is what Arun talks about. On May 28, 2021, when we last hugged and said our goodbyes, I truly believe that Stan would outlive his incarceration. However, looking back, what I failed to see was Stan's diminishing hope in the system, despite his decades of struggling for the rights of tribals and the poor. Stan had believed that the system would ultimately deliver when faced with reason and collective action. Now, the Bhima Koregaon Elgar Parishad case prosecution kept giving this belief repeated and fatal blows. His inclusion in the case itself was something he could never understand. The nature of the electronic files found in his computer was an impossibility in the wildest stretch of his imagination. Stan would repeatedly say, for the first few months after his arrest, he failed to understand why the NIA officials repeatedly lied to get him in custody. He was increasingly hurt by the system's routine insensitivity and injustice. However, he still nurtured the belief that the special NIA court would see through all this and grant him bail. Then the bail hearing started getting exhaustingly prolonged. To extend them even further, the NIA resorted to digging into the accounts of his Ranchi residence, which is Bagecha, and harassing his Jesuit colleagues. This further hurt Stan. And finally, when the special NIA judge delivered his order rejecting bail, Stan just could not believe its conclusions. The court had accepted all of the NIA's allegations. Evenings were now spent in silence, reading that order over and over again. This was early April, and the change in Stan's mood was becoming ever more apparent. His humor too gradually disappeared. Even the birthday wishes he received from numerous well-wishers across the globe on April 26 did not improve things. His increasing weakness amplified his neurological ailments. His hearing deteriorated further. His Parkinson's tremors became increasingly more violent. His eyesight too made newspaper reading difficult. So on that fateful day, when we bid adieu, I truly believe that this positive turn of events would help Stan recover, meaning him being shifted to hospital, and probably that would help. I guess I was mistaken. The freedom he desired still seemed far away, too far for his fatigued body to endure. We lost Stan. I think this is a very, very powerful testimony. And yeah, it's quite a long article. I've read parts of it, but he describes their conversations that Father Joe was also speaking about, and just how even in those inhuman circumstances that he was, and the condition that he was in spite of that, how he still had optimism, and then how that optimism and that morale was just broken in the months that he was continuously incarcerated. Now I'll read a letter by Vernon Gonsalves. This letter was written by him a year later, like on the occasion of his death anniversary. So it's more of an optimistic letter, I would say, and remembering him fondly. Again, I'll read parts of it. Dear Stan, it's now around a year to the day they said you went away, but it doesn't seem as if you've gone. Guys like you can hardly just go away. Not for me, at least. Not for many more you worked with and amongst. Actually, you haven't gone. In fact, you've come. You've come to the lakhs who've come to know you over the last year, and you'll continue coming down the ages to millions more. You can't go away. You won't go away. Some beings, some things of these beings just refuse to be no more. So it is with your writing. It doesn't grow shaky. It cannot stay still. Reading the things, literally hundreds of things written regarding you and your work, recalling you, reimagining you, it seems quite clear to me that you cannot but live on, you as word, you as struggle, you as life. From long before you stepped in through the red gate of the Taloja prison, your martyrdom was foretold. And the more they seemed bent on killing you, the more you were immortalized in our hearts. They took slow but sure steps to tighten the noose around you. When you did not bend after the first raid in August 2018, they steadily hacked your computer and planted the most weird concoctions on it. They then raided anew in June 2019, merely to show a discovery of evidence that they themselves had fabricated and put on your computer. We didn't know all of this, and when you and I together read your charge sheet in October and November 2020, we only came to know their criminal modus operandi when the forensic reports later came from the US, from Arsenal Consulting and others. I still recall the look on your face. First, bewilderment. Such stuff was never on your computer. Then a deep sense of sadness when you realize the devilish deviousness of their plot, but no anger. Stan, I think you are quite a stranger to anger. And that's what foxes the people that run the prison. Rage, resentment, and rebellion from prisoners is their daily cup of tea, which they cow down with violence and cunning. But how do you combat saintliness? They retreated in confusion, what they initially may have thought as your facade. They soon realized was a deep goodness that perhaps they hadn't encountered before. But they remained faithful to the institution, to the edifice that had embarked on what later came to be known as your institutional model. But they deluded themselves. They didn't extinguish. They couldn't extinguish what couldn't die down. In fact, your flame only glowed brighter through their darkness. It will yet see a dawn. Stan, one last thing. You remember your pair of banyans you left me while leaving the jail for hospital? Probably a premonition, probably a propensity to share whatever meager you've had. I've worn them more than 100 times since then. On hot days, they keep me cool. And in the cold, they exude a memory of warmth. They even serve to dry the tears that tend to wet every prisoner's eye. Stan, I have not known myself to genuflect before relics of saints, nor reconciled to the need for adoration at mausoleums of revolutionaries. So I'm not sure whether I should be uncomfortable with my desire to preserve and cherish these bits of you. But that's the thing with guys like you. You never go away. Love, Vernon. Sorry.
No, sorry.
So yeah, this we felt was very important that you guys hear and know about the people that he spent his last few days with, because he had an impact on their lives. And as we've heard from all the other speakers, he had an impact on a lot of other lives as well. And yeah, so we should also both of these pieces are available online. They're on the scroll. Please do have a look. In their entirety, they're really beautiful, and they really say a lot about Father Stan.
Yeah, we've put up already the article, the interview that Jean was talking about. I just posted that on Twitter, and we will post both these letters on its entirety on our social media as well for you to read and share. At this point, we thought that we wanted to put together a list of demands to assign accountability for what we think was custodial murder of Stan. It's okay. I'll do it. You wanted to put the demand? Okay. Sagar will put the demands on the screen, but I'll read them out for you. They will also be on our social media for you to share. But the first demand, and we've put together these demands in discussion with comrades who are fighting on ground. So the independent judicial inquiry into Father Stan's death. There is a need to look into the urgency on the part of the NIA in arresting him in spite of his continued compliance with their demands and the fact that he was not interrogated at all in the months which he spent in prison, which meant that there was no need to bring him into custody in the first place. The opposition to his bail application by the NIA, in spite of his health conditions, and the rejection of his bail by the NIA court. The apathetic prison officials of the Taloja jail who did not take notice of his deteriorating health until it was far too late. Accountability has to be assigned to the various factors that led to his death. His was not a natural death, and responsibility for it should be brought to books. And we demand accountability for his custodial murder. Clearing Father Stan name of all false charges. Due to Stan still being part of the charge sheet in the NIA case and the rejection of his bail by the NIA court, there is an implicit assumption of some sort of guilt. He dedicated his life to defending the rights of the most marginalized in our communities, and it is absolutely crucial that this blot on his legacy be cleared. Then can only justice for Father Stan be truly ensured. And finally, bail for the remaining Bhima Koregaon activists. There are still 13 other activists who are languishing in prison on grounds of similar false charges that were put on Stan. His case highlighted the inhumane conditions of the prison and the precarious positions that all these activists are in at the present. A number of them are above 60 or suffer from serious health conditions. Their continued incarceration is causing severe damage to their health, and the jails are not equipped to take care of them in case of further deterioration of their health. Keeping this in mind, and the highly questionable nature of the evidence that has been used to implicate them, it is crucial that be released immediately on bail to avoid any further harm to their health. We particularly would like to highlight the case of Varvara Rao, who has been granted medical bail for 6 months in February 2021. His appeal for extension of his bail, citing his ill health and need for further medical treatment, has been rejected by the Bombay High Court, and he currently has approached the Supreme Court for relief. If he's not granted bail and sent back to prison, he would be at great risk, considering how much his health has deteriorated in prison earlier. We cannot afford another custodial murder. Father Stan dedicated his life to highlighting the causes of Adivasi rights in Jharkhand and fighting for them, of how they were being displaced from their beloved Jal Jangal Zameen in the name of various development projects by both the industrialists and the states, of how they were denied their basic rights and entitlements through various government schemes and court judgments, of how young Adivasis were being arrested and kept in prison under false charges. He fought bravely and consistently for these causes till the very end, and he refused to back down even when faced with the full might of the oppressive state. He was not a silent spectator. In these increasingly grim conditions that we find ourselves in today, both India and the rest of the world, it is important that we learn from his example to not remain silent. As we said, we need to speak truth to power, as Father Joe reminded us through Stan's poem. Justice for Father Stan can only be ensured through our collective struggles for the most marginalized in our communities, but also to demand for justice for what has happened to him. And we're going to end with a video of his beloved Bagecha, because there's no other way to end it than in a place that he wanted to be his last. So we're going to end with end with that. But before we end, I just want to say from our part, sab yaad rakha jayega, that we will not forget. We will not forget his legacy, which continue to inspire us, our struggles, and our collective action. But we also do not forget the injustice brought by this oppressive regime and other oppressive regimes before him, before this, to him and to our other comrades and friends on ground. So sab yaad rakha jayega. John, can you hear now?
Yes, he said
The best introduction to Stan will be in his own words. When I decided to join the Jesuits, I sought to know where I will be needed more. I came to know about the indigenous Adivasi people in central India, and I lived in an interior Adivasi village for 2 years and came to appreciate their values, sense of equality, cooperation, sharing without counting, community bond, consensus decision making, close to nature, etc. At the same time, I saw how these beautiful people were being exploited and oppressed by unscrupulous outsiders. I wanted to make something of my life that would make even a small difference in their search for dignity and self respect. That's what I am still trying to do during the last 4 decades. Stan Swami, the 83-year-old Jesuit priest held under custody by NIA, has completed 100 days in Taloja jail, Mumbai. He is not alone in paying the price, and he was the last one to be arrested among the 16. Stan was not a silent spectator in the face of repressive regime. Standing with the oppressed tribals, accompanying them in their struggles for protection of their natural and mineral resources, empowering them to live according to their own governance system granted under the Constitution of India, and questioning the rules, regulations, and policies that were destroying the environment and society. Stan was a persistent, consistent human rights defender.
जंगल जमीन बचड़ करल संघर्ष
in every speech will ask people to join secular democratic movements that are happening for the protection of Jal Jungle Jameen. Whether it was a Netraghat field firing range from where about 200,000 Adivasis and Moolwasis would have been evicted, or Koyal Karo Dam, or movement and agitation against displacement in Rio mines in Kolkhani area, or Panam mines in Santal Parganas, Stan was present there, either physically or intellectually, facilitating various struggles in various places among the Adivasis. Singhbhum is dotted with mines, and the terrible consequences of the displacements and its effects are faced by the tribals. Jadugoda, with its uranium mines and its radiation effect, has completely destroyed the physical health of the tribals, as you see in the picture over there. In 80s and 90s, Stan joined many organizations in highlighting the tragedy of radiation and suffering faced by the displaced people. Stan, in one of the original contribution, took up the cause of under trials in Jharkhand. About 5,000 Adivasi youth were languishing in jails. He did research and brought out the book called Deprived of Rights Over Natural Resources, Impoverished Adivasis Get Prison, a study of under trials in Jharkhand. He, along with the lawyer and activist Ms. Sudha Bharadwaj, formed the organization called Persecuted Prisoners Solidarity Committee. They wanted to take these studies to Chhattisgarh and Orissa. The organization filed a PIL in Jharkhand High Court. last work that I would like to mention is the establishment of this institution called Bagaicha. He integrated the spirit of tribal philosophy, of simplicity, hospitality, ancestral heritage in this institution. We see Patalgadi, in which the names of the movements have been written. Here we are sitting in a place called Akada, where people can sit and take decisions concerning their community. I think it's very important that this place is here for the activists, for the human rights workers who can come and reflect over the issues that are affecting the ordinary people.
Well and touch upon. We may have future events we may have events in the future if any of y'all are interested, because it's a really big case and it's important to understand the details of it. Father Stan was one very unfortunate tragedy that happened because of this case, but it's basically like a ticking time bomb where you have 15 other people whose health and lives are in grave danger because of it. And yeah, like, thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you in future. Thank you.
And we put together a pack of resources about everything that was discussed today as well, and like a leaflet which kind of tells you more about the case. So please feel free to engage, ask us questions, reach out. We are here to answer questions more about the case, more about anything that you would like to know, but also like spread the word because we really need to build this struggle. Yeah, and just wanted to say a big thank you to Mihir, Father Joe, Rod, for taking time out and being here today and being so generous with your words and your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we also understand it's really late in India, so you stayed up to speak to us. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Good
for
night.
Thank you both of you, Adrija and Sagar. Thank you.